welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. You have found yourself at Casting Across Fly Fishing 350, the 350th episode. And as has been my custom since my 50th episode, I have broken the traditional Casting Across podcast format. Usually I'm talking by myself for about 20 minutes. I think I'm the only one in the fly fishing space that is doing this. Most folks have conversations with either people that they know, like a roundtable kind of format, or in an interview. And that's great. I have no problem with that. And I've been very tempted over the years to switch things up and do that. But I do like the way that I do this podcast, and a lot of folks, you, the listener, have written in or messaged me to let me know that it's nice to have a little bit of a change of pace. But as I said, I have switched things up on the 50th, 100th, so on and so forth, and brought guests on. I have brought some of the highest names in fly fishing to date to the podcast on these episodes. For example, my children and my wife. And it's just a fun opportunity for the people that get to listen to me record this every week and to watch me fiddling with the sound and posting it on the internet for them to be a part of it, because they are a part of it, whether they are not fishing throughout the course of the year or they are fishing a lot. They are a part of it. And today is different. I usually have a whole gaggle of children. I have 5 boys. But today, my eldest is going to share the recording studio with me, and so I will let him introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Timothy.
How old are you, Timothy?
13.
13 years old. All right, so Timothy had an experience recently that is what our focus of our conversation is going to be about. So tell everybody where you went and why you went there.
So my dad and I went to Pennsylvania down in Boiling Springs for my 13 trip this past year.
What's a 13 trip?
When I turn 13, I go on a trip for 2 nights.
All right, so we've kind of come up with this thing for our boys. We're going to try to do it where kind of major milestone years, we're going to go on trips. And so when they turn 10, they got 1 night. When they turn 13, they get 2 nights. I'm not sure what happens at 16 or 18 or 21 or whatever, but we're kind of figuring out as we go. And Timothy gets to be our guinea pig. Just for fun, where'd you go when you turned 10?
I think we went to Portland, Maine.
That's right, Portland, Maine. And what museum did we go to when you turned 10 in Portland, Maine?
Oh yeah, we went to the Bigfoot Museum.
Not the Bigfoot Museum, it's the Cryptozoology Museum. And so there were Bigfoots there, big feet. But do you remember that trip much?
Yeah.
Okay, what'd you eat for dinner that night?
Sushi.
Very good. All right, but there was no Bigfoots on this trip, but we did go to South Central Pennsylvania, and we stayed in Boiling Springs. What river did we fish primarily?
We mostly fished on the Yellow Breeches.
Right. Now, what were the water conditions on the Yellow Breeches while we were there?
It was sadly really muddy.
Yeah, muddy and high. They'd gotten thunderstorms for like the previous week. However, it had been at basically drought stage for like a month prior to that. So the conditions were not great. It was good for them. The fishing really turned on, but we were able to get out and get on the water. And so Timothy's been fly fishing in one way, shape, or form since he was little, but this was really his kind of first time where it was a lot of solo time and on this kind of water. So kind of describe Yellow Breeches to folks that maybe have not fished there.
It ranges from about 30 to 50 feet wide where we were fishing, and it gets a lot of cold water from all these different little spring creeks.
Yeah, so I mean that's the gist of it. Is it's a not a spring creek, but it is a spring influenced creek. And it probably gets more fishing pressure than any other stream in Pennsylvania. And so a lot of times you would say, well, that's the last place I'd want to go for a trip. However, it can certainly sustain it. And there's a great diversity of fishing on the Yellow Breeches. There are parts that are heavily stocked by the state. There are parts that are stocked by a private angling cooperative that's kind of a higher quality fish than the Commonwealth throws in there. And there's actually a lot of wild trout fishery that a lot of people don't know about. And so We didn't really have a chance to fish in the full scope of opportunities and options that are presented by the yellow breeches, but we were able to see a little bit of it, and you were able to get into some fish. And so, even though it was pouring down rain, what were we able to do that first night?
The first day we got there, I got, was it two decent sized rainbow trout, and I missed a bunch of them.
So one of the cool things for me, and this is actually really exciting, is that you caught your first trout on the yellow breeches about 10 yards from where I caught my first trout when I was probably 16. That was actually the very first trout that I ever caught on a fly rod. Was, like I said, only about a stone's throw from where you caught your first trout there on the yellow breeches. You caught other trout on the fly rod before, up in the mountains, but this was actually kind of like your first completely autonomous, me just standing there watching. Do you remember what fly you caught it on?
Yeah, I caught it on a copper john.
Were you fishing an indicator, or were you just dead drifting it or high sticking it?
I think the first one was just drifting it, but the second one I had an indicator.
Now, we used a lot of different indicators when we were fishing. Was there a type of indicator that you liked the best out of all the different types that we tried?
Yeah, I like the one where you put the line in between the two halves and you screw it on.
Yeah, the Oros strike indicators. I like those a lot. The foam ones with the hard plastic kind of male female screw interior, and we use the best color that they make, which is the one that looks like the little bobbers. I talked to the guy who makes those back at the fly fishing show this off season, and he said that initially there was some pushback on those, but now people have grown to love them. I think it's fantastic, especially if you're fishing them like they're a bobber. There's no sense in trying to hide what you're doing. Anyway, so that was the first night. You were able to get into some fish, which was awesome. I was able to help you land those, throw them back in, swam away, fine. And then we went out for dinner. And the next day we woke up and the water was even higher. And so we actually went to a different stream. So what was the first stream we fished the second day?
We got breakfast and then we went to the Latort.
Is it the Latort or the Letort?
I think it's the Latort.
I think that it is also Letort. A lot of the Pennsylvania old timers that are kind of from that area say Letort. But I think that James Letort, when he came and settled in that valley, coming from France, never pronounced his own name Lee Tort. But you know what? I'm not going to argue with people that probably can catch more fish than I can there. So describe the Letort. Just what did you think when you first saw this creek?
It's really, really, really clear, and it's probably about half the width of the yellow breechers, and there is a ton of greenery and trees and shrubs and all that stuff in it. There's also a bunch of plants in the water, which make it good cover for fish to hide in. So
Yeah, and so that's kind of how we fish. We drifted nymphs and we dead drifted streamers, which is fun, down in some of that weed cover. And we both, on our first casts, had fish come out. And so just describe that.
yeah, it was really fun. So we got down low and then we threw it in the water upstream from the weed bed, and it was floating downstream when this little brown trout came up and just popped it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of how it goes when, especially when in that stream and a lot of spring creeks, when fish aren't rising, they it's hunting, and you really have to be ready. And so I think for both of us, we both kind of made consecutive casts, and fish came up, and even though we should have been expecting it, we weren't. But that's okay. We got action. We actually talked to some women later that day who had been. We saw them getting guided, and they had basically the same amount of action that we did. No fish landed, but we got to see fish. We saw some big fish. We moved some big fish that we spooked. And that's always, when you're only fishing for a couple hours there, especially if you haven't been on the water for days or weeks prior to and kind of getting things figured out, it's always nice to move fish. I mean, that's where probably have fished more than anywhere else as far as like time spent on the water. And there would be days I would go, even though I felt like I know the water pretty well, without moving fish. So it was nice to be able to move fish, nice to see water, nice to take you on some of the places that I had fished quite a bit when I was not younger. Well, younger than I am now. You always were younger. You never were older. All right. So after that, we went into Carlisle. We got some Chick-fil-A, and then you had a particular stop that you wanted to make, fly fishing related. Where did we go next?
Yeah, it was the Fly Fishing Museum in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
So tell folks about that. What all did you see? What was it like? I had to kind of pull you out of there.
Yeah, there was this right when you walked in, there was this big wall of all sorts of fishing legend trophies and flies and fly rods, and it was really really cool. And there was free books.
There were free books, so that was nice. So was there anybody at the museum?
No, it was just us.
So how did that work?
I don't know.
It was like robotic. The door would lock itself, open itself, and lock itself between hours, and so it's definitely like an honor system of getting in there. But what were some of the interesting things that you saw in the museum?
Yeah, it was. There was a thing about Joe Humphreys teaching about fly fishing and biology and all that stuff at Penn State.
Yeah, that's definitely cool. They also had a like there's like a replica like fly fishing room from Vince Marinero and Charlie Fox and some other those guys, but definitely a place that I think a lot of people if you're in the area you should definitely stop into. It's not just the trout guys. There's other folks that you would know. I mean, Lefty Cray and Barry and Kathy Beck and Bob Clauser along with some of those other South Central PA limestone guys. So definitely worth stopping in. I'm glad that we did it, and it was a little easier to do it considering the water was as high as it was, and the fishing was a little bit difficult. So anything else to add on that?
Not really. It was kind of hard to get into, driving wise.
That's true. I even though I'd been there before, I'd forgot where we were going, and we took a wrong turn, but we made it. We survived. After that, where did we go fishing? We went fishing again somewhere else.
Yeah, we went to Big Spring Creek.
So Big Spring Creek is what kind of creek?
It's Spring Creek.
What size is it?
It's it's big.
There you go. So yeah, Big Spring is actually an amazing creek for a number of reasons. But what we walked upstream, so the stream is probably and I'd fished there quite a bit when I was again younger, but it's probably 25-30 feet wide, and so you followed it upstream, and then what happened at some point?
It was really cool because just went to this rock face, and then there was just a stream. There was water pouring out of the rocks. It was really really cool.
Yeah, it's a tremendously large spring, so it's appropriately called Big Spring, and it's a cool stream. So again, with a very very broad brush and very cursory explanation, it was a imperiled stream, and it still is in many ways. There were a number of dams on it, small like mill dams, earlier in the 20th century, and you might think, okay, that's the death knell for a fishery. Well, the brook trout actually took to it like crazy and got to be large, and it was known as a trophy brook trout fishery. And then browns were introduced, and they effectively took over as being the big fish. But then added to that, in the middle part of the 20th century, the Fish Commission put a hatchery in at the headwaters of Big Spring and pumped the affluent, so all of the crud into the stream. So the stream became nutrient rich, choked with weeds, changed the makeup of the stream, and although it maintained a incredibly kind of artificial fishery in the first couple hundred yards, affectionately referred to as the ditch. Downstream, it was basically devoid of life. And so now things are kind of turning around. I got into some little wild reproducing rainbow trout. But there's definitely brookies in there that I've been able to get into. But tell us just kind of about the aesthetics or what things looked like at Big Spring. Like what was around you as you were fishing?
Yeah, it felt a lot like the Latort, where there was like massive weeds and bushes on either side, and there were trees overhanging and rocks, and it was another shallower stream, and it felt like the Latort in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's cool because it's very it's like the access is easy. The fishing is not. I mean, there's times where the fish can be a little bit more ready to play ball, but It's also pastoral in the sense that there's like farms and livestock and all sorts of stuff that you can kind of see. So it's a very very cool scene. So we fished there until it was almost dark, and then we got dinner, and then the next morning you had a goal. What was the goal the last morning we were there?
I wanted to catch a brown trout.
You wanted to catch a brown trout, which is a very, very virtuous goal. And so we went back to the Yellow Breaches, even though the water was high and muddy. And you found your spot. You found some fish that were moving a little bit. And what happened?
So I was just casting, and then Dad decided to go downstream for a little bit, and like right after he left, I got one on the line, and I was reaching for my net when it got off. So he came back. I kept fishing. I caught another rainbow trout, and then I caught my brown trout.
Yeah, that was very, very cool that you had a goal, but then you didn't just kind of, try to chase after any random fish. You wanted to target a brown trout, and so you'd seen some moving in the water, and you targeted those fish, which is a really fun thing to do. Kind of a cool thing you can do at spring creeks. Even though the water was high and muddy, the visibility was still good enough that you're able to kind of target a fish. But then you kept catching fish and fish after fish after fish, and I started looking at my watch, thinking we were supposed to be home by nighttime, and but it was so cool because we had bluebird skies. The weather was great after a couple days of really really sketchy weather, and you just kept catching fish. What flies were you using that morning? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was mostly just the copper johns.
Yeah, I mean they were definitely keying into that fly that had a little bit of flash and had a little bit of weight in getting it down quickly in that fast water. So what were some of the things that you were surprised by fishing Pennsylvania, having really only fished either trout up here in New England or trout in the mountains in Virginia? What was different about these creeks?
It was surprising how many weeds and bushes there are. I mean, up in the mountains, it's mostly just big old trees and dead leaves. Um, and the water was for the spring creeks. It was clear, like up in the mountains, but it was just a whole different feel.
And then what about kind of being able to have all the room to cast? What did you notice about your casting mechanics? What were some of the things that you had to adapt to as you were fishing in really wide open spaces?
Yeah, it was a lot easier than fishing the tight, cramped mountain creeks, but it was sometimes it was kind of difficult because the weeds were just so tall that they were like above my head. So
Yeah, there was a lot of. I got to play guide and untangler quite a bit, but what was really cool for me was seeing the progress that you made. Really, that first night that we got there, but then over the course of the next few days, how I had to give you very few casting tips, unless you got nervous or anxious about the fish in front of you, in which case your cast sort of devolved. But that's a pretty common ailment that people have when they see it. It's like buck fever, basically. When you see a big fish in front of you, your cast starts to fall apart. Um, what else about Pennsylvania? Anything else that struck you about the fisheries or the kind of the environment the fish live in there?
yeah, I was surprised at how many fisheries there were. Just going from Big Spring Creek to back to our resort that we were staying on the Yellow Beaches, we passed like two or three fisheries.
Yeah, it's definitely a spoil of riches there, and it's cool to see how in many places in the let's see, it's 2025 in the 15 years since I moved from there, how a lot of these streams have improved, and how different they are. I mean, they're still the same stream, but they definitely are different. So, all right, would you suggest people go fish the spring creeks of Cumberland County?
Yes, definitely.
All right, would you give them a restaurant recommendation when they're there?
Yes, Navarro Pizza. Their stromboli is really good and really big.
Yeah, so Navarro's was called Aniles when I lived there. It was Aniles for a long time, and even though they changed ownership, we gave them a shot, and we were not disappointed by the very, very heavy food. And gas station wise, what's the gas station of choice when you're in Pennsylvania?
Sheets.
That's right. We don't have sheets up here in New England, so it's definitely a treat. Although just last month, or no, earlier this month, Where did you go? What gas station?
We went to Buc-ee's.
That's right. The grand opening of the northernmost Buc-ee's in Virginia. That's totally different trip. That's for another podcast. Actually, let's tack that in there. We were able to fish for wild brook trout up in the Shenandoah Mountains, which is always fun when we get to do that. I mean, it's same fish, same kind of geology and topography that we have up here in New England, but it's fun to fish down south also. All right. Anything you want to add about Pennsylvania, Virginia, trout, beaver themed gas stations before we sign off?
Yeah, if I was to recommend two different streams down in Pennsylvania and Virginia, I would recommend Big Spring Creek and the Mormons River.
Fantastic. Well, Timothy, I always have fun fishing with you. I always enjoy exposing you to places that I fished at when I was just a little bit older than you and that I've enjoyed. I think it's one of my things that I've been looking forward to the longest being a dad is having, not just going there and checking it out and dipping your little toes in the water and, things like that, but actually you getting to fish. And so it was super cool for me that you wanted to, that you chose to going fishing down in South Central PA. And it's always fun to do that. So thank you very much.
You are welcome.
All right. Well, there you have it. You will hear from one of my children again in 50 weeks, unless something changes, which you never know. Things might change. All right. Well, this week on Casting Across, two articles came out. The first one is called Summer 2025 Fly Rod FAQs. So this is added to my list of fly rod frequently asked questions. So for the last, 25 years, I've been involved in fly fishing in one way or another with other people. And whether I was selling fly rods, teaching fly casting, running a camp, or doing casting across, people have been asking me questions about fly rods. So I just kind of have a running list in the back of my head about fly rod questions, and so I added 5 more to the list, including what is your favorite fly rod? What is my favorite fly rod? So that is in there. Wednesday's article is called Video, a book for all anglers, hunters, and outdoorsmen. So this is a recommendation for a non-fly fishing book in my fly fishing book review series. But it is Stephen Rinella's Meat Eater. So you probably know Meat Eater from one of the many places you can find their content online, on TV, in a bookstore, and a Bass Pro Shop. This would be a great starting point for understanding the ethos and the mentality that you will find behind Stephen Rinella's, suite of content. So there's some just fantastic stuff you can watch, but I would say this is a great place to kind of understand what has set him and his friends apart in hunting and fishing. This week's recommendation is actually a tag onto Timothy's suggestion that you go down and fish South Central PA. And if you are doing so, then call up the good folks at Precision Fly and Tackle, which is in Mount Holly Springs. I'll put a link to Precision's website in the bottom of the show notes of this podcast page, but they have a handful of locations, but this is the original in beautiful Mount Holly. This was a fly shop that is relatively new. I mean, there's some older fly shops that have been around for a long time, but Precision is relatively new, but they have really established themselves as a wonderful resource for anglers. They always make a great showing at the fly fishing shows, so if you are at the shows in like New Jersey and in Lancaster, then you've probably seen them. But definitely good folks, worth looking up, can give you some awesome information. They have other locations in PA, but if you're going to South Central PA, you definitely want to look up Precision Fly and Tackle in Mount Holly. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. Please subscribe to your favorite podcast app and rate the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.